Thank you all for your patience till now. I tried to write things down as I saw that time is proceeding. So let me try to read some of the things that I have written. Actually, I thought about that home is where it all started. Our mother's womb was actually our first home. Yes, it was our shelter. It was the place which we felt safe, secure, and surrounded with love. Ever since, human beings have been searching for a similar home to be in during their life's journey. Home is actually much more than a physical entity. It's not the physical structure that constitutes the home. The home is not the walls around. A home is where our dreams and plans for the future evolve. It's when we think about losing a home, it's an unforgettable tragedy that might affect our lives for long. I'm looking at you and I will ask you to look around you. You can look and see that you have colors on your walls. You have pictures. I can see pictures. I can see books all around. I see memories. I see life. You are surrounded with warmth and life. This is home. This is the place that you evolve and rest in. When we think about home and the term homeland, we see the similarity, home and homeland. Thinking about home and homeland and thinking about the Palestinian tragedy of actually losing both homeland and home during the years. Palestinians have been struggling in losing their womb more than 75 years now, while the international community is taking aside and looking about this on this tragedy, not doing enough to stop it. Now imagine all this, the loss of home, the loss of homeland, the loss of memories, the loss of love, and imagine this cumulative effects while you are ordered and instructed to demolish your own home by your own hands. And I heard my previous colleagues explaining very well the legal issue around this, but I want you to imagine the psychological tragedy of a person that is instructed to destroy their own houses that they have been building for many years for their children and family and memories, and they are instructed now to destroy all these memories by their own hands. Otherwise, they will be asked to pay a huge fine or fees. This is actually the case of colonized Palestine, 75 years living under and experiencing this threat of losing our homes, and we need to learn to manage and to go through life experiencing this continuous threat. Now some statistics. 52,000 homes, 530 entire villages and towns were totally destroyed during the Nakba of 1948. Another 55,000 homes were destroyed since 1967. Okay, more than 12,000 people were displaced just during the 10 years in Palestine. The demolition is part of Israel's policy to Judaize Palestine. It's a deliberate policy to displace people. This demolition of houses during Nakba, during 1967, was done not in the heat of a battle, but actually after the fight had ended. The use of the house demolition, as was said, it is now under the international law by the Fourth Geneva Convention. The house demolition is considered a collective punishment. However, Israel insists that this law is not applicable to Palestinians on the ground because the Palestinian territories, according to Israel, does not constitute a state. That's why, even if Israel is a part of the Geneva Convention, they still continue in this policy of house demolitions. Their claim that the law is not applicable to Palestinian territories is, of course, rejected by all human rights organizations. The Israeli government maintains the claim that house demolition is carried out based on planning laws. It's all legal in Israel. Displacing people is legal. Demolishing houses is legal. It's all in under the coverage of law. And we think as Palestinians that the law is a part of an apartheid law. It's a discrimination law. It's not that our houses are illegal, but their laws are illegal. It's not that we have to authorize our houses, but the Israeli government must revise their discriminatory laws. In the last 10 years, there have been unprecedented rise in self-demolition orders. It's the saddest, most cruel phenomenon that we might see. For example, 82% of the house demolished in East Jerusalem, people were ordered to do it by their own hands. 82% of families were ordered to demolish their own houses. We think that Israel policy goes beyond resulting in cumulative injuries to individuals and properties, but it aims to destroy the social structure of family and relations. Professor Ghanadry-Hakim, who is my supervisor in my PhD, wrote a lot about demolition of houses. She wrote about the demolition before the demolition. Palestinian people get the order of demolition and they have to live under this threat for years. People are ordered to pay fines for many, many years. Sometimes for 20 years, they pay tens of thousands of shekel, never knowing where the actual demolition will happen. So families, fathers, mothers, children, kids, always live under this continuous threat that one day their house will be demolished. Meanwhile, they are ordered to pay tens of thousands of shekels in their everyday life, trying to stop this demolishing, but actually the demolishing in the end, it happens. You never know when, you never know why, you never know not the day, the date, the time, the hour, and people need to take all their memories or their stuff in a rush and to find an alternative place to be in. You should know also that even collecting the ruins of the house, Palestinians need to pay fine in order for Israeli for the ruins that destructed house, demolished house, the ruins that remained after the house was demolished. Saying all that, I was actually very much surprised, not but by the fact that some Palestinians do actually experience trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder. I was shocked by the fact that the majority of Palestinians actually do not. So what happens? Why the majority of Palestinians do not experience traumatic symptoms as the international literature might expect. And that's why we started to try to understand what's going on. And we now understand that the traditional definition of post-traumatic stress disorder does not apply actually to the Palestinian people. The traditional definition of trauma, it all evolved around national traumas, about war, about accidents, about specific traumas. And when this trauma finished, people might experience reactions. But in the Palestinian case, we are actually never post. We're not post anything. We're not post demolition. We're not post colonization. We're not post killing. We live in a continuous trauma, in a cumulative trauma. We're not post trauma. That's why the PTSD term does not apply to Palestinian. We also understand that the trauma in Palestine is not specific. It's everywhere. It includes everyone. It's cross-generational. It's intergenerational. Children, parents, grandchildren, their parents. So you are talking about 75 years of traumatic incidents affecting 4 or 5 generations. As well, in the definition of trauma, implies that you have a secure place that you can experience avoidance reactions. If you have encountered a bus accident, you will stop for a while going on buses. We'll stop for a while driving, for example. But in Palestine, how can you avoid trauma? How can avoidance reactions be applicable in Palestine? Trauma is everywhere. So there is no possibility of avoidance at all. That's why we think that experiencing PTSD actually is a privilege that we don't have yet. When we started visiting families and asking for their narratives of what happened, we visited families that their houses were demolished. Some of these families, their parents' houses were demolished. Some other families, they were displaced from inside, from villages that were inside historical Palestine to refugee camps, and their houses were demolished as well. So we visited families with multiple traumas. And instead of hearing about trauma, I heard about the sumud. I heard about the resistance. And I saw families communicating. I saw families crying during communicating, but still the relationships between family were still very much solid. The narratives of the families show a much more higher resistance than we've expected. The families did not internalize the Israeli narrative of you are being accused of terrorism, you are being accused of not legal actions. Actually, the families communicated with their members, the sumud, the resistance, the alternative narrative of the cause, that our cause as Palestinians isn't just a cause. We fight for fairness. We fight for fairness, as one of the children told me. His name was Yoa'd. He said, "I'm still young, but when I will become older, I will be a lawyer and I will go to the international court and I will sue Israel." So I smiled. I knew that Israel didn't, and all this demolition didn't take Yoa'd's livability, didn't take his wish for a better life and his hope a better life. So Yoa'd might be very young now to hold Israel accountable for its actions, but you are not. So we ask the international community to stand not only with the Palestinian people, but to stand with humanity, to stand with justice, and to hold the actual criminals accountable for this ongoing tragedy that our people is living in.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. And now I shall call upon Duncan if there's a question in the chat line to put to Yoa'd. If you could select one, that's what we'll have time for now. And obviously, Yoa'd, with all your research, you have to come back and do a really long session with us one time. But yes, Duncan.
Okay, I'm not sure whether Yoa'd is able to answer. There was just the one question regarding whether Gaza was included in the data on demolitions. Is that those demolitions there? Is that included in the statistics?
Yes.
Okay.
But what you see in Gaza, it's in the last years. But when we are talking about Nakba and 1967, and we're talking about 1948, it didn't include Gaza. 1967, it didn't include Gaza. We see the huge statistics about the demolitions in Gaza in the last 10, 15 years.
Okay. Actually, I just had a supplementary question. It's very encouraging where you say like Western concepts of PTSD doesn't apply specifically in Palestine, but I'm just wondering about the services on the ground for, I mean, some people will suffer from trauma. I mean, are there some services to support people either through your organization or charities?
Yes, of course, not charities. I work as a head psychologist in the Palestinian Counselling Centre. It's in a local non-governmental organization providing mental health services for above 35 years now. We are all more than 40 psychologists and counselors with master's and PhD degrees, and we work on both on the individual and the collective level. As well as Palestinians, we understood that beyond the individual level services, something must be done on the collective level. That's why we established what we call the Global Palestinian Mental Health Network. It's a network of all Palestinian counselors living inside and outside Palestine. We said that Israel, when Israel was established, it actually divided Palestine to Israel, Jerusalem, Gaza, and refugee camps, and millions of Palestinians are living now outside Palestine. But why, as psychologists, should we apply to this division of Israel? Why should we have a union of Palestinian counselors in West Bank, a union in Gaza, a union inside Israel for Palestinian, and union, etc.? That's why we established this global mental health network in order to address our issues as Palestinians and try each one from our own positions to find a joint solutions.
Okay.